There have been a lot of changes and a lot of upheaval in the media and news industry. And what better person to talk about it than Oliver Darcy, who is the editor in chief, am I correct, of Status,
That is
which is a
correct.
newsletter? Yeah,
Yes.
and media reporter and former colleague and friend. Oliver, thanks for joining.
I'm very happy to be here.
Oliver, let's talk about the latest. We'll just go in order of what's
Okay.
happening. Big layoffs at the networks, to CNN and MSNBC, but they're not alone. Others are going through it as well. But what is going on at those two networks?
Well, I mean, I think what's going on at NBC and CNN is that they are dealing with the decline of traditional television. Linear television is in decline. These are television networks, and they are trying to lean out as their business model crumbles beneath them. And they're also trying to transition to a digital future. And so I think what you're seeing and what you're going to continue seeing is these companies spending less money producing television, traditional television, and taking that money, cutting, and moving it over to the digital side.
But isn't television still, isn't it like 70, close to 80% of their income or
It is,
their
yeah.
profits?
It's most of it. I mean, that's where they're making the bulk of the money, and that's where it gets very tricky because you have to basically do this like transplant surgery. So you want to keep the patient that you're transplanting from alive. At the same time, you need to move over to digital, and so that's where it becomes dicey. And you can't really afford in this moment to completely forget about television. That's still the core product. That's still, as you said, making most of the money. At the same time, you do have to invest in the future. And so I think you're seeing executives, whether at CNN or NBC or anywhere that's doing television, I think you're seeing them try to do this delicate balancing act. And, it does unfortunately result in some cuts.
Yeah, but I believe the biggest cuts are coming from CNN and NBC, in which we'll talk about the ratings, especially
Mhm.
post election and even inauguration. Just real quickly on this subject, are we going to see any additional layoffs in the future? And by the way, how many people are you thinking here?
Well, at CNN today, they're laying about 200 people off.
As of this taping, 200 people.
Yes, I think that this is going to be a continued trend. I don't expect that these numbers are, this is not like this is going to be one layoff and then they're going to be fine for the next 5 years or something like that. I think you're going to continue to see these companies cut, and reinvest some of that money in digital, but they're also got to lean out because the future business model, the digital business model, is not going to produce as much money as the cable news bundle has or as just linear television has. It's just not. And so as a result, these organizations are going to have to shrink. That means their blueprint, their footprint's going to shrink, and they're not going to be. And I think too, you have to keep in mind that the media industry, the environment, it's fragmenting quite a bit. There are shows like this. I have a newsletter that's independent. The industry, the gone are the days when there were like 3 big channels and people watched the evening news and that was it. Now it's completely broken up, and I think as a result, these organizations are going to shrink, and there's not going to be that one voice or those big names necessarily who anchor television news. It's going to be split up.
Well, the thing that I've realized just from doing this that those organizations are like giant cruise ships, right? It's hard to turn them around. And in this media environment, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're more of an expert, but I am experiencing what it's like to be an independent journalist, is that you have to be nimble and be where the trends are. And sometimes it's better, usually it's better to get content on the fly rather than having the setup and the big camera and then feeding it back and all of those things that were important in traditional linear television, like the shiny anchor desk and all that. No one cares about that anymore, especially with the advent of this. People are getting content on this and getting more engagement than traditional television networks.
That's exactly right. And it's kind of like, I think, when radio went to television, like you can't do a radio show on television. That's just not the way it works. And I think you can't necessarily do TV on digital. That's just not the way it works. That has to be made for the product that people are consuming the information on. And I think it's going to be tricky as you see these big organizations that, I think for a while, networks like CNN tried just to basically cut what they did on television and put it on Instagram or TikTok. And I think they're realizing that's not going to work. So they're going to need to change. And one of the advantages, I think, though, of being independent, like ourselves, is we can film a video. I can join you on this podcast or this show, and we can do it I can do it in 2 minutes. And there's no infrastructure holding us back. I think organizations that are big are going to have to become more nimble to succeed in the future.
Yeah, and you don't. It's not even turning around. We could just go live,
Yeah.
live at the click of a button, and put out information. Not you don't have to go via the satellite and all that stuff. And hang on, let's make sure this. So it's very interesting being in this space right now. By the way, do you think they can do it? Can they? Because this is all about scale, as you
Yeah.
know. Do you think that they can do it and compete with younger people or people who are actually okay with using cell phones or not setting up a giant tent of people on a red carpet? Do you think that they can do it?
I think we're going to see. I do think the issue is that a lot of these people pay, at these networks on television, they've been getting paid a lot of money, and they have not been producing the volume of content that independent YouTubers, for instance, would produce to earn that same salary. And so, if you're paying someone, several $100,000, one or two videos a day is not going to cut it. I mean, you need to be really producing. And so I think the issue is going to be like, can you sustain these big television salaries with a digital product? And the answer is probably not. So I think you're going to see for it to work, you're going to have to see these salaries come down. You're probably going to see a lot of top correspondents, for instance, depart or find other opportunities because companies are not going to be able to afford to pay someone big television money when that platform is dying, and the amount of money you make on digital is just not the same.
Before we talk about the ratings of it all and the tone of it all, covering going into the very beginning now, and then covering the Donald Trump administration and term for the next 4 years. Let's talk about MSNBC, which was interesting that Comcast is spinning them off, and the actual company that they're creating is called SpinCo, or spinning them to is called SpinCo. Can you talk to us about that situation? And is
Yeah.
that a possibility for other networks like CNN, maybe Fox, although Fox News is doing very
Well, and I think the reason Comcast is cutting the cord, I mean, Comcast is a huge cable provider, by the way. So the idea that they're spinning off their cable channels, they're saying to everyone, particularly to Wall Street, that they realize that's a dying business, and they want to cleave it off its profitable arm. And so, yes, they're spinning off MSNBC, CNBC, as well as all their other cable channels like the Gulf Channel to the separate business. And right now it's called SpinCo. It'll have an actual name at some point when they actually finish the spinoff. But I think what's interesting is can these channels survive with outside the Comcast empire, right?
Yeah, but Oliver, is it just that, or is it that, Donald Trump is a creature of television news, right? Especially cable news. He came from, the whole thing that created him was the Celebrity Apprentice, which was a television show, not real. It's not a great businessman, right? But it presented him in that light. And so people believed it. So television was very powerful, still very powerful, not as powerful as it was. But the question is this about tone perhaps, or that they don't want a cable news host or someone screwing up their business with the Trump administration, their mergers and acquisitions? The FCC, the person who's in charge of the FCC, apparently has a connection to Project 2025 and is very conservative. Is that all part of it as well?
I look, I don't think that's the main driving force behind it. I think the economics are really the main driving force behind this. But I certainly think that Brian Roberts over at Comcast would rather not have to deal with having MSNBC and having to deal with that. Donald Trump, for instance, tweeted or posted on his True Social account today that he doesn't think MSNBC should basically be able to operate, right? And so if you exile that from your kingdom, I think that maybe Brian Roberts might be breathing a little easier. And I also think what we haven't talked about is the current chief of SpinCo, so he's in charge now of MSNBC, Mark Lazarus. He has privately said, and I've reported this, but instead of private conversations, that he thinks that the perception of MSNBC is that Republicans can't get a fair shake on the network. And so he would like to tweak MSNBC, not entirely, but a little bit, so that Republicans do feel like they can get a fair shake on the network. And what that looks like, that remains to be seen. I don't think you'll see like Rachel Maddow no longer on the network. I think that would be crazy. But I also think that it's possible you might see some tweaks to the dayside coverage on that channel that move more in the favor of Donald Trump and the Republican Party that he leads. And I can tell you that is troubling to some people inside the network, and I think it might potentially be troubling to some of the viewers if they feel like someone's tweaking the editorial bent of the channel.
Well, I often wonder a couple of things. Let's talk about this, okay? And then I want to
Sure.
remind myself to get back to this. I think it's an important point, but I need to talk about the overall thing. So we're talking about tone, and I have examples. And again, this is happening everywhere. We're not just picking on CNN, but this is just an example. I want to play this for you. Well, let me just tell you. Apparently, the head of CNN, Mark Thompson, had a conversation, according to your reporting, with the journalists over there. And the top journalists, you said that Jake Tapper was there, Anderson, it was virtual,
Yes.
and I'm sure a bunch of the other journalists, just basically saying, hey, watch your tone. Correct me if I'm wrong, or
Sure.
how you are presenting, or at least looking at I don't know, just presenting
Yeah.
the inauguration.
On Sunday afternoon before inauguration, Mark Thompson held this meeting. He convened the top journalists at CNN, the top anchors, the top correspondents, the top producers, and they had this meeting where they talked about how they were going to cover inauguration. And in the meeting, Mark Thompson made it very clear that he did not want the network to focus on Donald Trump's past. And what does that mean? That means his impeachments. That means his criminal convictions. That means the corruption that was, I think, defining feature of the first Trump administration. And so what happened was, when you watch inauguration coverage,
Wait, hold on, before we get there, but isn't that an interesting part of the story? Doesn't that make the story more interesting and
that's a
actually
crucial
gives
part
you
of the
the
story.
real? It
Yeah.
tells you exactly what. Look, I think it's. Imagine who would have thought that you had a presidential candidate who was on trial for much of his candidacy, was convicted in a number of different courts, and still turned out to be president. That is a major and perhaps the most interesting part of the story, Oliver.
It is. I mean, that is a key part, a crucial part of the story. And the fact that CNN left it out was strange to me. So that's actually what happened. Was I wrote on the night of inauguration that CNN did not mention one time, Don, not one time during the special coverage, that Donald Trump was twice impeached, that he was the first felon to to take the oath of office. And so I wrote this, and then the next day I learned that the reason that was because Mark Thompson, the head of CNN, held this meeting and basically offered this guidance to his troops, saying, I don't want to fixate on Donald Trump's past. And so it was very clear to people coming out of that meeting, do not mention the impeachments, do not mention the criminal convictions, or even just the general day-to-day corruption that we saw during the first term. He said, Thompson said, we need to basically not prejudge Trump. And we need to give him a chance. And so that's what you saw on air on Inauguration Day. You saw people like a Jake Tapper, who normally would contextualize this thing, who would have some probably harsh words for Donald Trump being at the Capitol Rotunda that he incited an insurrection on, really just sort of narrating this as if it was a normal affair.
Well, let's. I like evidence. I like facts. Remember, I'm an old school CNN journalist, and the CNN that I came up in, or the time of journalism I came up in, it's to show the evidence. So I just want to play. This is just a little bit of Jake from 2020 after Joe Biden was declared the winner. Watch.
It's been a time of several significant and utterly avoidable failures. Most tragically, of course, the unwillingness to respect facts and science and do everything that can be done to save lives during a pandemic. It has been a time where truth and fact were treated with disdain. It is a time of cruelty, where official inhumanity, such as child separation, became the official shameful policy of the United States. But now the Trump presidency is coming to an end, with so many squandered opportunities and ruined potential, but also an era of just plain meanness. It must be said, to paraphrase President Ford, for tens of millions of our fellow Americans, their long national nightmare is over.
Okay, Oliver, that was 2021, right? After he was, no, 2020, after he was declared the winner. And that made me proud. It really did, to be a journalist. And I thought that was really great that Jake did that. And look, let's just say that was during I think we can say that's the zenith of CNN, the most profitable time, the highest ratings. Now, this is this is inauguration day that we talked about, just the start of their coverage, and see if you notice a tone difference.
This is CNN special live coverage of the inauguration of Donald Trump. I'm Anderson Cooper in our studio in Washington, D.C.
And I'm Jake Tapper, overlooking the White House that will soon be the Trump White House once again. The president-elect on the verge of sealing his unprecedented political comeback, opening the door to radical and immediate change here in Washington, D.C. and across the country.
Okay, so look, do you think there's a tone difference? And again, not just at CNN, but we'll broaden it out in a bit. But do you think there's a tone difference there? It certainly seemed a little bit more muted or subdued.
There was no doubt there's a tone difference. And I have no doubt that Jake Tapper, who delivered those comments on Inauguration Day, would have much rather have been the Jake Tapper of 2020, actually delivering hard-hitting reporting and news and context to viewers versus that muted, just kind of like background noise, I think was what Puck put it as, on Inauguration Day. I
so
just
Oliver, but the whole point of it, well, not the whole point, isn't a big part of it being relevant and also giving is this why viewers maybe are, I don't know, tuning out of news because it's kind of anodyne, or because they feel that the journalists are kind of pulling their punches a bit?
I think so. I think that one of CNN's problems, I mean, obviously there is the just decline of cable. That's a thing that's happening. That's a real thing. Millions of people cut the cord. And so that's just less people that are watching. But I do think that a significant problem has also been the editorial decisions that they've made. And I think people would much rather watch a tough as nails anchor really hold power accountable in a meaningful way than to watch just, a version of C-SPAN. And I think that what CNN would rather be the powers that be there, and the new owner, Warner Brother Discovery, I think they'd much rather be a C-SPAN where Republicans go on, Democrats go on. It's non-controversial. The anchors just sort of ask questions. They don't really press the subjects. And that's just the reality of it. I mean, you've seen this really consistently since Warner Brother Discovery took over, whether it was with first network chief Chris Licht, who also was pushing this editorial mantra. And I think you're seeing it now in some ways. They just don't want to be the CNN of yesteryear. And I think that is actually alienating some parts of the audience.
Do you think this, let me play this. This is Jim Acosta, who was I believe, wasn't Jim the chief White House correspondent during Donald Trump? Do viewers want more of this or less of this? Or you can talk to me about the tone, if you think this is a tone change as well. This is Jim Acosta interviewing a Republican lawmaker recently.
We had riots where towns were burning down, and they were allowed to do it. They were allowed to do it, and you all did not. You covered it, Jim. Come on, Jim.
All day
you gave
long.
it the bare modicum of coverage, and then you went on to trash Trump or some conservative cause.
I was at the White House covering the first Trump administration when they had rioting outside of the White House. I mean, that was covered on CNN. What you're saying, this is not Fox, Congressman. You can't just spin a tail and pull the wool over people's eyes.
Yeah.
This is CNN. This is the news. We are asking you to come on and tell the truth.
And that's why more people are watching the Cartoon Network SpongeBob reruns right now, Jim. Look, I left the White House during a riot. My life was threatened. My life has been threatened within the last few weeks, yet there's no coverage of that. And you all continue this narrative of attacking Trump. You just can't stand the fact that he won and that America spoke.
Congressman,
and that your view is very diminished.
That's not the case at all.
And your view is very diminished.
I asked you to come on to ask you about these pardons because they are highly controversial and they could result in people getting hurt. And I think that's a sincere question to ask.
If they break the law, then they go to jail. If they break the law,
went to
then they
jail,
go to
and then
jail.
The president let them out of jail. And all I'm asking you is for you to say that if you feel it's wrong, say it's wrong.
That's the key. They did go to jail. And under these Soros-backed DAs all across the country, these people are walking for much more heinous crimes than this.
What's interesting is that on many of the networks, or on the networks, you see them paying Republican consultants or Republican, I don't know, contributors saying outrageous and outlandish things, but there is no equivalent of that on the left. What does that have to do with the environment or the time that we're in? Because there is a Trump administration coming. I'm trying to figure that out. Make it make sense to me.
No, I think that's somewhat what is going on here is that everyone wants to be in with the Trump administration. He is the president, and he's made it very clear that he will wield the powers of the federal government in a way that will punish critics. I do think there are Democratic contributors on these networks. It's just that the Democrats happen to have their feet in reality, generally speaking. They might have political opinions, right? They might think that the wealthier should be taxed more or have different policy preferences on the Middle East, but they're not just making things up. And generally speaking, they're not launching these really appalling attacks on critics the way that a lot of people in MAGA media are, or a lot of these MAGA contributors are doing. And so I think that's what the jarring difference is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I want to talk about again. I don't want to continue to focus on CNN, but those are the examples. And I do have an example of MSNBC, which is also, having issues when it comes to ratings. And, the whole Joe and Mika of it all, about them going down to Mar-a-Lago. Every time I speak about it, by the way, on this program, the Rupert Murdoch news organizations, the Post and whatever, mischaracterize it as if I am hitting, Mika and Joe, and I'm not. I'm just analyzing them. But this is a conversation that was had on Morning Joe, and I found it fascinating. And I said, this is what should be happening on television. And I think that maybe the bosses, or I'm not sure, someone is afraid of it because there's not enough of it. I don't know if have you seen this conversation with
I
Michael
haven't.
Steele?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, here it is.
Proper conversation.
Michael, I'm not saying we're walking in a winter wonderland.
Joe, you had your moment. Let me just finish the point.
I know, but
I get
tell
that.
us something we don't know.
Well, I'm telling you something that you seem to forget. And
I don't.
let me make my point. You may not like it, but I'm going to make it. And the reality of it is, I take your civility argument, and you like to say 78 million people voted for Donald Trump. Well, 82 million people voted for Joe Biden.
Right.
And he didn't get that civility that you're talking about from Donald Trump in those 4 years.
Right.
So now the expectation is, because he's won again and he got 78 million people, we all got to be civil to Donald Trump. Well, okay, I'm prepared to be civil.
Nobody said that.
You did.
No, I didn't say it.
I
did. No,
so
I didn't say everybody has to be civil.
The reality of it is, you're using the term civil. I've never used that term. I'm using your term. You put civility on the table.
You said we all have to be civil. There is a pushback that you have to have.
But Joe.
I'm just talking about Barack Obama.
I'm not fine. I'm not talking about that. My main point is everybody's looking at this from a one-way perspective. How we need to approach Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. How the hell is he approaching us?
Yeah.
Right? The man wants to lock up citizens. The man wants to turn the government against him. How are we to respond to that? Are we supposed to be civil?
Michael, do you think we don't know that?
Doesn't seem like it.
Michael, why do you...
Not you. I'm just saying the broader
Michael,
you.
Why do you feel the need to create false choices?
I'm not creating a false choice. I'm using your words.
You have created...
I'm using you. You put civility on the table.
My words. You took me saying that it's not the end of the world, that Barack Obama smiled and talked to Donald Trump, and you're turning that into that we have no idea what's before us.
I'm not.
You will play very well today on Blue Sky and Threads and X. Congratulations.
I'm not playing to anybody. I don't have an audience here. I'm just saying. I don't have a particular. I'm talking to the American people just like you are. I'm using the words you use.
No, you're twisting.
And so I'm not twisting your words. So let me untwist them.
Okay, good.
Civility is a two-way street, as I said at the very beginning, and then you attacked that.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
That.
You did,
Michael.
You did. So you didn't know.
You need to go back and look at the tape.
We can look at the tape.
Okay. So there you go. And I thought fascinating. He stood up. He's actually telling the truth And it was the only time, if I'm watching Morning Joe, that I would turn it up, is to watch something like that, because that is real talk. And I think that would go for MSNBC, for CNN. Actually, I think Fox does have those kinds of conversations. They may be more right-leaning. ABC, NBC, CBS, whatever. When people start to speak like normal people, rather than this false presentation of let's go now and we can't do this, is this, again, part of the reason why do you think that the executives and the folks who are in the management roles at these networks are really missing out on something, and it might actually help their ratings or their positions if they leaned into something more akin to that than anodyne?
Well, I think it's one. It's a little bit difficult to create those. I mean, you can't really curate those moments, like they just can't happen organically. But I do think that generally
They
speaking,
happen organically, but you have to allow someone the leeway and the ability to be able to go there, right? You can't say, well, we can't do this, we can't do that, we don't want this. You have to say, just be a journalist and factual and just be honest about, make sure, as long as you tell the truth, we're good. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And I think that generally speaking, you see these podcasts where a lot more, it feels like the conversations are a lot more authentic. They're a lot more freewheeling. They go for much longer, and you see audiences gravitate toward those podcasts, those media platforms. Whereas too often, maybe on cable news or just traditional broadcast news on television, it's very formulaic, right? You get 60 seconds, that person gets 60 seconds, that person gets 60 seconds, and then the segment's over and you move to something else. And I think that we're in a time where people are actually craving a little more of a long form conversation, a little bit more of an authentic, raw conversation. And sometimes when that happens, right, people disagree, they disagree passionately. And I think audiences find that really compelling to watch.
What effect did ABC settling with Donald Trump over the George Stephanopoulos thing and the whole, abuse versus rape conversation, libel of sexual abuse rather than rape conversation? What kind of effect is that, or did that have on the industry? And also, we have the LA Times with their editorial issues saying that they don't want it. I guess they're backing off on some of their critical coverage of Donald Trump. And then you have the Washington Post not endorsing Kamala Harris, but then yet I believe, reportedly, you can tell me if I'm wrong, endorsing Pam Bondi, right? So what kind of effect is that having on the industry?
Well, I think just broadly speaking, everyone is almost trying to throw Donald Trump a bone right now because he is the president and he has promised and vowed basically to use the office in a way that no one really has before. And he has made it no secret. Again, he will punish perceived political enemies or critics. And so whether it's at CNN, maybe moving Jim Acosta and taking him out of the lineup, whether it's
that's right, Jim Acosta is moving.
Well, he's not moving yet anywhere. I mean, today they released the lineup and he's not in it. So we'll see whether he does accept their midnight offer. They want him to anchor midnight to 2 a.m. when no one's watching. But that's something that's happening right now. You have Jeff Bezos over at the Washington Post, as you said, not blocking an endorsement that his paper wanted to make of Kamala Harris, and making it pretty clear, I think, signaling pretty clearly that he wants that newspaper to be, as I think their new mission statement or slogan or whatever their testing says, for all Americans. You see at the LA Times, the owner, Patrick Soon-Shiong, another billionaire owner, he blocked the Kamala Harris endorsement, and he has made it clear that he wants MAGA commenters to be part of the opinion pages. He's rolling out this bias meter or something, making it very clear he wants the Los Angeles Times to be some welcoming of the MAGA movement. You saw it at ABC, I think, to some extent, where they moved to settle this lawsuit that Donald Trump filed against the network because of George Stephanopoulos and his comments about what the jury found. You've seen it maybe at Paramount right now, where they're trying to get a complex merger approved by the federal government. And according to the Wall Street Journal, they're having conversations about settling an absurd lawsuit Donald Trump filed against 60 Minutes. And they're just maybe having a conversation about settling so that they don't have to deal with feuding with the president as they're trying to get this deal done. And then you're seeing it in big tech, Don. We could go down the list. It might take a whole hour. But with Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, getting rid of third-party fact-checking on that platform, allowing people to really disparage immigrant communities, LGBTQ communities, removing the protections that were once there for those communities on there. And I mean, we could go down the list, but you're seeing it broadly, I'd say, across the media and tech sectors, that everyone wants to throw Donald Trump a bone. They want to bend the knee a little bit because they do not want him to use the federal government, which he has promised and vowed to do, in a way that's bad for business. And I think that in general across the industry has had a huge chilling effect because people are afraid, frankly. They don't want to get on his enemy list. And that's scary because these organizations, particularly the news organizations, are supposed to hold power to account. And when you have that chilling effect, I don't know. I mean, that's really disconcerting.
What's surprising to me is that the people who run all of these news organizations, right, journalistic organizations, also run media companies who make movies and television shows and those kinds of things, where there are characters and people know that drama is, for the most part, not saying drama, but interesting characters who people want to watch is their bread and butter. It's their stock and trade. I don't understand why they don't get it. That's the same thing as it relates to news. People want to watch folks who are interesting. Say what you want about Sean Hannity. He's interesting. People want to watch him. Do you know?
Well,
say what you want about.
The issue is that a company like ABC News is owned by a larger company called Disney, and ABC News is a very tiny, tiny, tiny part of that much broader company.
Well, should they be? Well, the whole thing is that should they own it then? Shouldn't there be a wall between the journalism and maybe those folks should be less reliable on the money from the journalistic part of the organization and let the journalists do their thing? After all, that is protected in the First Amendment, freedom of the press, and perhaps they should treat it differently than they do, when they're looking at movies or the Disney, whatever it is, whatever company it is, meet the organization that owns these journalists.
Well, I think that's actually why people are turning to independent journalists and independent news organizations, because they don't trust the information often that they're getting from some of these long-standing corporation or corporate entities, because they feel that the corporations are influencing the coverage that they're getting, and they're not entirely wrong either. That's the thing; they're not entirely wrong. And so,
Oliver, sorry, finish your point.
I was going to say, and so they're hungry for outlets that are not controlled by these other outside factors. They want really, they don't want to feel like their news is being compromised by business decisions.
Provocative question, but an honest question. Is American media now basically state-run?
I wouldn't say it's state-run, but I would say that it's alarming to see some of the decisions that these people are making, these owners are making, whether corporate owners or ultra-wealthy owners, because when you have a bully, you do not appease that bully. That doesn't work. The thing that you do is you stand up. You don't allow yourself to be pushed around. And unfortunately, the tact that most of the people in the industry are making, the people that are in charge of these corporations, is the opposite. It's to bend the knee a little bit. And that sets a really dangerous precedent, I think.
It's your job to cover the media and also to look into the future, look around corners. So take us around the corner. What happens next, especially as it relates to the profession of journalism? Covering journalism in 2025 is kind of depressing, I must say, just to be totally honest, because you're covering a lot of decline, whether it's on the business side, where newspapers are struggling just because newspapers don't have a viable economic model in a real way, and they're struggling to just make ends meet. And then on top of that, you have the editorial stuff that you're covering, and you're seeing I'm covering the editorial collapse, at the Los Angeles Times or the Washington Post, or at outlets, like what's going on with CNN and some of the stuff that's going on over there. And so it can be depressing, I'd say. The one thing that does give me a little glimmers of hope is there are some really cool independent publications and organizations starting. I'm on the show that what didn't exist a few years ago. There's outlets like 404 Media. Those guys cover tech and billionaires that run tech companies. And there are also
people, I think, the leaders of some news organizations, legacy news organizations, that are doing the right thing. And I guess we don't talk about them enough. But over at The Verge, for instance, Nile does the right thing, really, really holding power to account there. The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, very clear-eyed about Donald Trump. He's not taking a conservative or liberal position. He is just covering Donald Trump in a very clear-eyed manner. And so
I agree with you. I agree with you about the Atlantic. I love sorry to cut you off. I love the reporting in the Atlantic. It is as close to, well, not as close to, just allowing journalists to be journalists and not putting your thumb on the scale. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I know. And there's, you could go to, I mean, there's a lot of organizations that are doing good work, and I think we could probably highlight them. I actually think, maybe a controversial take here, that New York Times does a great job. If you read their news stories, they are generally, by and large, sharply written and fairly unsparing of what's going on Donald Trump. And we know a lot about his corruption, whether it's taxes or political or whatever, as a result of the good reporting they've done. And so I think there's a good work across the board, not across the board, but in the industry, that we could probably focus on more. But it's really disturbing, being a media reporter, because you do end up gravitating toward where the corruption or the nefarious activity is. That can be a little bit, it can be depressing, Don.
Yeah, and look, and I just want to say, we focused on the cable guys for much of it, CNN and MSNBC, but there are cuts at ABC News, right, that are coming.
They're coming, CBS. They are coming. They're expected.
CBS, once Paramount gets in there, and so it's all over the place. But I want to talk to you about this, because you've written about the ratings. When you saw the ratings come back after the inauguration, were you shocked?
I think no. I think that I was actually predicting this for a while, and it's on par with like previous trends. If you looked at 2016, when Donald Trump was elected, ratings outside Fox News, they went down, and then when Donald Trump was inaugurated, they started climbing up. And so it's actually very consistent with the past. Whether they come back though in the same numbers for the same amount of time, I think that remains to be seen, and whether particularly an outlet like CNN can recapture that lightning that it had in the first administration without providing the same type of coverage, I think is a very, very much an open-ended question, and I doubt it, but we'll see.
I don't know if it's just the networks. I think I think folks just have Trump fatigue at this point. I don't think that it's going to return at any network, right? Fox News are going to love it, but I think for the most part, folks have Trump fatigue, and they also have news fatigue, and they know that they've seen this movie before. They know when Donald Trump takes office, it's going to be a barrage. It's a fire hose of news every single day. Mm-hmm. And I think they've learned to sort of modulate and moderate a little bit about what they consume and what they don't. But I was shocked to read that when I read some of the news organizations, down from like 10 million to just over 2 million for this inauguration. And I said, how much of that has to do with coverage and how much of it has to do with just fatigue over Donald Trump? Like, I've seen enough of this.
I think in particular for MSNBC and CNN, I think their audiences don't want to watch Donald Trump get inaugurated. I think that those audiences were probably tuned out, and I think that they tuned in when Joe Biden won, because that's something they wanted to watch. They wanted to watch.
Are they coming back? Is that audience coming back?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's really the open-ended question. I think the ratings are up a little bit right now in the first, Donald Trump's done a lot, and so he's going to keep everyone busy. I also do think, to some extent too, Don, we can't forget that Donald Trump is really, in his eyes, I think, putting on a show, and he is a master media manipulator, and he knows how to get attention. And so I wouldn't underestimate anything he would do to get that attention. He craves it, and he's in office, and he's probably going to find a way to get it. I think, though, the one point I'd make is that in the last administration, I think legacy news organizations were really the big beneficiary. People subscribed to the Washington Post in record numbers to read about Donald Trump. They turned on CNN to watch what was going on with Donald Trump. I think that it probably won't happen in the same way this time, but I think independent news organizations are going to do really well and capture a lot of that, because people, I sense it every day. People audiences are really wary. I think a lot of audiences are wary about the coverage you're seeing on these, from these corporate-owned news networks or by these newspapers that are owned by the ultra wealthy, and they're canceling subscriptions and they're moving their dollars elsewhere. And so I think that after 4 years of Donald Trump, you might see an emboldened independent press, if you will, because that's where consumers are spending some dollars.
Yeah. I will tell you just from my experience, if things continue on track the way they are, and since Christmas, we will have doubled our subscribers on this, and we were already doing very well. So there is, actually some evidence to what you're saying. Oliver Darcy, I love reading Status. And what else do you have? Where can folks find you?
They can find me on status.news. That's exactly what, and I would encourage you all to sign up. There's a free tier. There's also a paid tier. Every subscription really helps power my independent voice as well. Because there are no major corporations or billionaires behind Status. It's backed by readers. And I think that's actually appealing to a lot of people. And that's really cool as a media reporter too, because I'm not inside a major corporation anymore. I can really cover everyone even-handedly.
Yeah. Well, best of luck. Thank you, my friend. I'm a subscriber by you. I'm a member.
Don is one of the originals. One of the original subscribers to Status.
One of the originals. Yeah.
Got to get you a hat or something.
Yeah. You do great work, and you're very honest, and you don't pull punches. I mean, look, Oliver, you've hit me. You were not happy when I made the deal with X, correct?
This is true. I think I had some sharp words for you when you signed that deal with Elon, and when I was writing reliable sources at CNN.
Yeah. But I'm okay with that because that's how.
And I appreciate that, Don, too, because a lot of people take things, very personally. I try to cover. I cover media with an even hand, and I think that's what's really missing a lot of times is hard hitting coverage, and sometimes it can be uncomfortable to do, but I think it's important. And so when I'm writing about people at CNN, like Jake, I assume it can be tough to read that stuff, but I think it's important that people in media are held accountable as well, because they have very influential positions in society. Yeah. And I think that it makes everyone a little sharper.
Yeah, they're writing history. They are literally writing history in real time. Yeah. Thank you, Oliver. Status.news. Everybody go check it out. Oliver Darcy.
Thank you, Don.
Thanks, everyone, for watching. Your support means the world to us. So make sure you hit the like button and you subscribe to our channel to make sure that you never, ever miss a video. We're live every day, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We drop even more content at 2 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you want more Don Lemon Show content, we'd love for you to become a member of the Lemon community, where you will receive access to special community posts. You'll get exclusive content and members-only live shows. So head over to our channel page or click the join button on this video. Again, thank you for watching. We appreciate your love and your support, and we will see you next time.